Sarah Mitchell wiped down the metal serving counter for the third time that morning, her movements precise and economical. The breakfast rush at Forward Operating Base Hawkins had ended an hour ago, leaving behind the usual mess of spilled coffee and scattered napkins. She worked alone in the kitchen, preferring the quiet rhythm of cleaning to the chaos of meal service. At 32, Sarah looked unremarkable in her food service uniform. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail, sleeves rolled up to reveal arms that seemed lean rather than muscular. The soldiers who passed through her line twice daily saw nothing more than the woman who served their meals with a polite nod and efficient movements. They never looked closely enough to notice how her eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats with the automatic precision of someone trained to survive. The base commander, Colonel Matthews, entered the dining hall carrying a steaming cup of coffee. He paused at Sarah's station, offering his usual friendly smile. "Morning, Sarah. How are things in the kitchen today?" "Everything's running smooth, sir," she replied, her voice carrying the slight drawl of her Louisiana upbringing. "Fresh batch of rolls coming out in 20 minutes if you want to swing by." Matthews nodded appreciatively. Like everyone else on base, he knew Sarah as the reliable kitchen worker who'd arrived 6 months ago through the civilian contractor program. Her paperwork listed her as a former Army cook with an honorable discharge, seeking stable employment in familiar surroundings. Nothing in her file suggested anything more interesting than a competent food service worker looking for steady pay. The truth was far more complicated. Sarah had indeed served in the military, but not as a cook. For 8 years, she'd been part of an elite Navy SEAL unit, one of the first women to complete the grueling selection process when the program opened to female candidates. She'd earned her trident through the same hellish training that broke most men, then spent years on classified missions across 3 continents. Her teammates had called her Ghost for her ability to move unseen through hostile territory. That life ended abruptly 2 years ago when an operation in Eastern Europe went sideways. Sarah's team had been tasked with extracting a high-value intelligence asset from a compound deep in hostile territory. The mission briefing called it a routine snatch and grab, but routine missions didn't exist in her world. The compound turned out to be heavily defended, with sophisticated early warning systems that detected their approach long before they reached the target. What followed was 18 hours of running gunfights through dense forest, with Sarah's 4-man team vastly outnumbered by pursuing enemy forces. They'd managed to complete the mission and extract the asset, but at a terrible cost. Her team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, had been shot through the chest while covering their retreat. Sarah had carried him 3 miles through hostile territory, fighting off multiple ambushes while keeping him alive through field medicine and sheer determination. Webb survived, but his injuries ended his military career. The other 2 team members weren't as fortunate. The official after-action report praised Sarah's actions and recommended her for commendation. Unofficially, she struggled with survivor's guilt and the weight of decisions made under impossible pressure. The Navy offered her counseling and reassignment to less demanding duties, but Sarah chose a different path. She requested discharge and disappeared into civilian life, seeking anonymity and distance from the world that had shaped her. Now she found that anonymity in the most unlikely place, serving meals to soldiers who had no idea they were being fed by someone who'd once been among America's most elite warriors. The morning routine continued as Sarah prepared for lunch service. She moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, checking inventory, adjusting seasoning in large pots of soup, and arranging fresh bread in warming baskets. Her hands worked automatically while her mind wandered to the carefully constructed life she'd built since leaving the teams. She rented a small apartment off base, furnished with the minimum necessities. No photos on the walls, no mementos from her military service, nothing that might prompt uncomfortable questions. Her neighbors knew her as a quiet woman who worked long hours and kept to herself. She'd even created a believable backstory about growing up in small-town Louisiana, learning to cook from her grandmother, and joining the Army for steady employment, before transitioning to contractor work. The deception felt necessary. Sarah had learned that people treated her differently when they discovered her true background. Men either challenged her competence or treated her like a curiosity. Women often seemed uncomfortable around her, uncertain how to relate to someone who'd lived in a world so far removed from normal experience. Easier to be the friendly kitchen worker who remembered how everyone liked their coffee. Lieutenant Davis approached the serving line, interrupting her thoughts. Young and eager, he'd arrived at the base 2 weeks ago as part of a rotation of fresh officers. "Hey, Sarah, any chance you've got extra portions today? My squad's been running drills since 0500, and they're pretty hungry." "Always enough food for hungry soldiers," Sarah replied, ladling generous portions onto his tray. "Tell them to drink plenty of water, too. Temperature's supposed to hit 110 degrees today." Davis nodded gratefully and headed to join his men at a corner table. Sarah watched him go, noting the way he carried himself, confident, but still adjusting to command responsibility. Reminded her of younger officers she'd worked with during her SEAL days, before experience taught them the difference between movie heroics and real-world survival. The lunch crowd began filtering in right on schedule. Sarah fell into the familiar rhythm of serving, her movements economical and precise. Scoop, portion, pass the tray, repeat. The work required little conscious thought, leaving her mind free to observe the soldiers around her. She noticed things others missed. The slight limp in Sergeant Rodriguez that suggested an old training injury he was hiding from medical evaluation. The way Private Thompson's hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking, probably struggling with stress from his first deployment. The tension between two corporals who were clearly having a personality conflict, but trying to keep it professional. These observations came naturally after years of reading people and situations for threats. In her SEAL days, missing such details could mean mission failure or death. Here, this simply helped her understand the small community she'd chosen to serve. As the lunch rush wound down, Sarah began cleaning up for the afternoon break. The base would be quiet for a few hours before dinner preparations began. She enjoyed this peaceful time when the dining hall emptied and she could work in solitude. She was scrubbing the large soup pot when the first explosion shook the building. The sound was distinctive, not the controlled detonation of training exercises, but the sharp crack of incoming artillery followed by the deeper rumble of buildings taking hits. Sarah's body reacted before her mind fully processed what was happening. She dropped to a crouch behind the heavy kitchen counter, eyes scanning for the nearest exit while her hands automatically checked for weapons she no longer carried. Alarm klaxons began wailing across the base. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as the base's defense systems activated. Over the intercom, Colonel Matthews' voice cut through the chaos with practice comm. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Base is under attack. Proceed to designated defensive positions immediately." I repeat, this is not a drill. Sarah's training took over completely. She moved to the kitchen's small window and carefully peered out, using the reflection in a metal surface to avoid exposing herself directly. What she saw made her blood run cold. The attack was coordinated and professional. Multiple vehicles had breached the base perimeter simultaneously, suggesting detailed intelligence about defensive positions and patrol schedules. She counted at least 30 enemy fighters moving with tactical precision through the compound, their equipment and movements indicating serious military training rather than random insurgent activity. This wasn't a probe or harassment attack. Someone wanted this base taken or destroyed, and they'd sent professionals to do it. Another explosion rocked the building, this one much closer. Through the smoke and dust, Sarah saw enemy fighters advancing toward the dining hall. They moved in coordinated teams, using proper cover and fire discipline. Several carried shoulder-fired rockets, explaining the devastating accuracy of the initial barrage. In her peripheral vision, she noticed Lieutenant Davis and 3 of his soldiers trapped in the dining hall, taking cover behind overturned tables. They'd been caught in the open when the attack began, cut off from their designated defensive positions. Davis was trying to radio for instructions, but his handheld unit had been damaged by debris from the first explosion. The young officer looked terrified but determined, checking his rifle and trying to keep his men calm. Sarah could see he was thinking about making a run for the exit, not realizing that enemy fighters had positioned themselves to catch anyone trying to flee the building. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Her new life depended on maintaining her cover, staying invisible, being nothing more than the woman who served meals and minded her own business. Getting involved would expose everything she'd worked to hide and drag her back into a world she'd deliberately left behind. But watching those young soldiers trapped and vulnerable, she realized some things mattered more than carefully constructed anonymity. The woman who served meals was about to disappear. It was time for Ghost to come back to life. Sarah moved with deadly silence through the kitchen, her body remembering skills she'd tried to forget. The transformation was immediate and complete. Gone was the quiet food service worker who smiled politely at soldiers. In her place stood a predator who'd survived countless hostile encounters through superior training and ruthless efficiency. She inventoried her available resources with practiced speed. The kitchen offered limited weapons, but creativity had always been one of her strengths. A 10-inch chef's knife went into her belt. A container of industrial cooking oil could create slip hazards or fire accelerant. The large metal pot she'd been cleaning became an improvised shield. Not ideal equipment, but she'd worked with less. The real advantage lay in her knowledge of the building. 6 months of working here had given her intimate familiarity with every room, corridor, and service passage. She knew which doors stuck, which floorboards creaked, and where maintenance panels provided access to crawl spaces between rooms. The enemy fighters might have intelligence about the base layout, but they didn't understand the dining hall like someone who'd cleaned every corner of it daily. Through the serving window, she could see Lieutenant Davis and his men still pinned down behind their makeshift barricade. The young officer was bleeding from a head wound where flying debris had caught him, but his eyes remained alert and focused. His 3 soldiers looked scared but determined, following their lieutenant's hand signals as he tried to coordinate their limited options. Enemy voices echoed from outside the building, speaking in what sounded like Russian-accented English. Professional military terminology, not the excited chatter of inexperienced fighters. These men had done this before, probably many times. They were advancing methodically, clearing each room with textbook precision while maintaining communication with their team leaders. Sarah counted at least 6 hostile fighters approaching the dining hall from 2 directions. Their tactics suggested they planned to enter simultaneously from the main entrance and kitchen door, catching any defenders in a crossfire. Standard room-clearing procedure that would be devastatingly effective against trapped soldiers with limited ammunition. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they reached the dining hall. Not enough time for a complex plan, but sufficient for direct action. Moving to the kitchen door, Sarah pressed herself against the wall and listened carefully. Footsteps approached from outside. 2 men, moving cautiously but confidently. She could hear their equipment jingling softly, the rustle of tactical gear against clothing. They paused just outside the door, probably coordinating their entry with the team approaching from the main entrance. Sarah gripped the chef's knife in her right hand while positioning the metal pot as a shield with her left. When the door burst open, she was ready. The first enemy fighter entered in a tactical crouch, rifle raised and finger on the trigger. Sarah exploded from her position beside the door, driving the pot into his weapon while the knife found the gap between his body armor plates. He dropped silently, his rifle clattering across the floor. The second fighter had a split second to register his partner's fall before Sarah was on him. She used his own momentum against him, redirecting his forward movement into the wall while the knife finished what had started with surprise. 2 down before either could raise an alarm. Sarah quickly stripped useful equipment from the bodies. The first fighter's rifle was a modern assault weapon in excellent condition, with 3 spare magazines. The second man carried fragmentation grenades and a tactical radio. She clipped the radio to her belt and adjusted the volume to monitor enemy communications. Through the radio chatter, she learned the attack was even larger than she'd initially realized. Multiple teams were hitting different sections of the base simultaneously, with this group assigned to secure the dining hall and adjacent buildings. Their leader was coordinating movement from an overwatch position, directing teams based on real-time intelligence about base defensive positions. The main entrance to the dining hall exploded inward as the second enemy team made their entry. Four fighters burst through the doorway in classic formation, expecting to catch the trapped soldiers in a devastating crossfire with the kitchen team that should have entered simultaneously. Instead, they found Lieutenant Davis and his men ready for them. Sarah had used the precious seconds gained from neutralizing the kitchen team to position herself where she could support the trapped soldiers. As the enemy fighters focused on the overturned tables where Davis's team sheltered, she opened fire from an unexpected angle. Her first burst caught the lead fighter center mass, dropping him instantly. The second man spun toward her muzzle flash, but moved too slowly. Sarah's military training emphasized speed and accuracy over spray and pray tactics. Every round counted, every shot was deliberate, every target was precisely engaged before moving to the next threat. The third fighter managed to return fire, his bullets sparking off metal surfaces near her position. Sarah rolled to new cover behind the serving counter, using her intimate knowledge of the room to stay concealed while maintaining offensive pressure. The fourth enemy fighter tried to flank her position, but walked directly into Lieutenant Davis's field of fire. The young officer had rallied quickly once the tactical situation changed in his favor. His three soldiers followed his lead, emerging from cover to engage the remaining threats with coordinated fire. What had been a death trap moments before became a killing ground that favored the defenders. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds from start to finish. When the smoke cleared, for more enemy fighters lay dead while Davis and his men remained unharmed. The dining hall was wrecked, tables splintered by gunfire, walls pockmarked with bullet holes, windows shattered by explosions, but the soldiers were alive. Davis stared at Sarah with undisguised amazement. "What the hell? Who are you really?" Sarah ignored the question while checking the tactical radio for updated intelligence. The enemy commander was demanding status reports from the dining hall team. When no response came, he dispatched reinforcements to investigate. They had minutes, maybe less, before more fighters arrived. "Lieutenant, we need to move your men to a better defensive position," Sarah said, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death decision-making. "This location is compromised, and we can't hold it against a larger force." "You're not military anymore," Davis replied, but it came out as a question rather than a statement. Everything about Sarah's movements, her tactical awareness, her precision under fire screamed elite training and extensive combat experience. "Right now, I'm the person trying to keep you and your soldiers alive," Sarah answered. "We can discuss my background later if we survive the next hour." She moved to the shattered windows and carefully observed the base courtyard. The main attack was concentrated on the command center and barracks, where the heaviest resistance would be expected. Several buildings were burning, sending thick smoke across the compound that would provide concealment for movement. The base's automatic defense systems had been partially disabled by the initial bombardment, leaving gaps in coverage that could be exploited. The enemy commander was smart, Sarah had to admit. He'd identified the base's critical vulnerabilities and struck with precisely the right amount of force to overwhelm defenses without wasting resources. This wasn't random terrorism or opportunistic raiding. Someone had provided detailed intelligence and careful planning for a specific objective. Through the radio chatter, she began to piece together the enemy's true purpose. They weren't trying to destroy the base or kill everyone. They were after something specific. References to the package and secured transport suggested this was an extraction mission disguised as a general attack. "Lieutenant," Sarah said, turning back to Davis and his men, "what kind of classified materials or personnel are housed on this base? Something important enough that enemies would risk a major assault to capture it." Davis looked confused for a moment. Then his eyes widened with understanding. Dr. Elizabeth Chun. She arrived 3 days ago with a military escort, some kind of Defense Department scientist working on classified projects. She's been staying in the VIP quarters while conducting research with our technical staff. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Dr. Chun would be valuable enough to justify this level of risk and resources. The attack wasn't random violence. It was a precisely targeted kidnapping operation with the chaos of battle providing cover for the real objective, which meant the enemy was probably already moving toward the VIP quarters while base security focused on defending against the apparent main assault. Classic misdirection that would be devastatingly effective unless someone recognized what was really happening. Sarah checked her newly acquired rifle and ammunition count, enough for what needed to be done if she moved fast and used every advantage her training provided. The young soldiers with her were brave and willing, but they lacked the specialized skills required for what came next. "Lieutenant, I need you to take your men and link up with the main defensive positions," she told Davis. "Follow the service corridors behind the kitchen to avoid open ground. Once you reach friendly forces, tell Colonel Matthews that the dining hall attack was a diversion. The real objective is Dr. Chun." "What about you?" Davis asked. Sarah was already moving toward the kitchen exit, her posture and bearing transformed completely from the woman who'd served his meals just hours before. "I'm going to get the doctor back." She paused at the doorway and looked back at the young officer. "And, Lieutenant, when this is over, forget what you've seen here today. Some things are better left as questions that don't get asked." With that, she vanished into the smoke and chaos outside, leaving Davis and his soldiers to wonder exactly who had been serving their meals for the past 6 months. The woman who'd saved their lives was clearly not the simple kitchen worker they'd known, but someone far more dangerous and infinitely more skilled than her cover identity suggested. In the growing darkness of the smoke-filled base, Ghost was hunting again. Sarah moved through the base like a shadow, using smoke and destruction as camouflage while she closed in on the VIP quarters. Every sense was hyper-alert, her body running on the combat adrenaline she'd thought she'd never experience again. The familiar weight of a rifle in her hands felt both foreign and natural, like greeting an old friend after a long absence. The enemy had done their homework well. Their assault plan created maximum confusion while positioning forces to control key access routes. But they'd made one critical error. They assumed base personnel would follow standard defensive protocols, consolidating at predetermined positions to wait for reinforcement. They hadn't planned for a lone operator moving independently through their carefully orchestrated chaos. Sarah's route took her through maintenance areas and service passages that didn't appear on any official base map. 6 months of daily routine had given her intimate knowledge of every shortcut, every forgotten storage room, every utility corridor that connected buildings without exposing movement to observation. She'd used this knowledge to avoid conversations with curious soldiers who might ask uncomfortable questions about her background. Now those same passages became infiltration routes that enemy intelligence had never identified. The tactical radio continued providing valuable intelligence about enemy positions and objectives. The assault leader was coordinating 3 separate teams, one maintaining the distraction attack on the main base, another securing their extraction route to waiting vehicles, and a third moving directly toward the VIP quarters where Dr. Chun was housed. Professional military communications, encrypted but following standard protocols that Sarah recognized from her operational experience. She paused at a maintenance hatch that opened near the base motor pool. Through the metal grating, she could observe enemy fighters establishing a security perimeter around several black SUVs with tinted windows. Military-grade vehicles, probably armored, with drivers who kept engines running for immediate departure. This was their exfiltration plan: grab Dr. Chun, fight their way to the vehicles, and disappear before reinforcements could respond effectively. The timing suggested they'd rehearsed this operation extensively. Every movement was coordinated, every position carefully selected, every contingency planned for. Except they hadn't planned for someone like Sarah operating independently behind their lines. She counted 8 fighters securing the extraction site, armed with automatic weapons and wearing professional tactical gear. Body armor, night vision equipment, communications headsets. These men were mercenaries or special forces, not random insurgents. Their equipment alone represented a significant financial investment, suggesting wealthy sponsors with serious political or economic motivations. Moving past the motor pool, Sarah continued toward the VIP quarters through a drainage culvert that ran beneath the base's main roadway. The concrete tunnel was cramped and uncomfortable, but it provided concealed movement directly toward her objective. Her knees and elbows scraped against rough surfaces as she crawled through sections barely wide enough for a human body, but discomfort was irrelevant when lives hung in the balance. The tunnel emerged in a utility room adjacent to the building housing VIP quarters. Sarah listened carefully at the access panel before slowly pushing it open. No immediate sounds of enemy activity, but her tactical radio indicated the assault team was approaching from the opposite direction. She climbed out of the tunnel and immediately assessed her surroundings. The utility room contained electrical panels, water heaters, and cleaning supplies. Nothing immediately useful as weaponry, but the electrical systems offered interesting possibilities for someone with technical knowledge. Sarah had learned basic demolitions and sabotage during SEAL training, skills that translated well to improvised solutions. The VIP quarters occupied the second floor of a converted administrative building. Dr. Chun would be housed in one of 4 suites designed for visiting officials and high-value personnel. Standard security protocols would have her in the most defensible room, probably the corner suite with the best sight lines and multiple escape routes. But standard protocols assumed defenders who understood they were under attack. Sarah moved through the building's lower floor, checking each room methodically while monitoring radio traffic for updates on enemy positions. The assault team was still several minutes away, moving cautiously to avoid base security patrols that were slowly organizing defensive resistance. She had a narrow window to reach Dr. Chun before the professionals arrived to collect their prize. The stairway to the second floor was exposed and dangerous, offering no cover if enemies appeared from either direction. Sarah checked above and below before ascending quickly, her rifle ready but finger alongside the trigger guard. No point in making noise unless absolutely necessary. The second floor hallway stretched 40 feet between opposing wings of VIP suites. Sarah could hear movement from the corner room, voices, someone pacing nervously, the sound of furniture being moved to barricade a door. Dr. Chun was apparently awake and aware that something was wrong, but probably didn't understand the nature or magnitude of the threat approaching. Sarah approached the corner suite and tapped gently on the door. "Dr. Chun, I'm here to help. I work on the base." Silence from inside the room. Then a woman's voice, carefully controlled but clearly frightened. "Who are you? What's happening out there?" "My name is Sarah. There's been an attack on the base, and you're in immediate danger. I'm here to get you to safety, but I need you to open the door now." "How do I know you're really military?" Anyone could claim that. Sarah understood the doctor's caution, but time was running short. The tactical radio indicated the assault team had reached the building's lower level and was beginning their ascent. Perhaps 2 minutes before they arrived at this door, with considerably less friendly intentions. "Dr. Chun, in about 90 seconds, our men are going to break down that door and take you hostage. Your choice is to trust me now or deal with them when they arrive. But you need to decide immediately." Movement from inside the room, then the sound of furniture being moved away from the door. Dr. Chun opened it cautiously, revealing a woman in her mid-40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore civilian clothes and carried a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. "You're not military," Dr. Chun said, noting Sarah's food service uniform. "You're the woman who served breakfast yesterday." "Right now I'm the person keeping you alive," Sarah replied. "We need to move. Is there anything in your room that absolutely cannot fall into enemy hands?" Dr. Tien klotsit her laptop bait title. My research data. It's encrypted, but bring it. Stay close and do exactly what I tell you. Sarah could hear tactical radio chatter indicating the assault team had reached the second floor. Move. They headed toward the rear stairway, but Sarah stopped when enemy voices echoed from that direction as well. The assault team had split up, covering both possible escape routes. Professional tactics that trapped them effectively on the second floor with limited options. Sarah quickly reassessed the tactical situation. Standard building assault procedures assumed defenders would try to escape through conventional exits. The enemy would expect them to attempt the stairways or possibly rappel from windows. They wouldn't expect movement through the building's infrastructure. This way, Sarah told Dr. Chun, leading her toward a maintenance access panel at the end of the hallway. That's a utility closet, Dr. Chun protested. No, it's an emergency exit they don't know about. Sarah pulled the panel open, revealing a service passage that connected to the building's air conditioning system. The passage was designed for maintenance access to ductwork and electrical systems, but it also provided a route between floors that bypassed normal traffic areas. You're kidding, Dr. Chun said, staring at the cramped space. Dr. Chun, they're here to kidnap you, probably torture you for information, and kill you when they're finished. This passage leads to the basement and connects to drainage tunnels that exit outside the building. Your choice. The sound of doors being kicked open echoed from nearby rooms as the assault team began systematically clearing the floor. Dr. Chun looked at the narrow passage, then at Sarah, and made her decision. She climbed into the maintenance space without further argument. Sarah followed, pulling the access panel closed behind them just as enemy voices reached the hallway outside. They crawled through darkness, guided by Sarah's memory of the building's layout and the faint sound of air circulation equipment. Dr. Chun moved quietly, following Sarah's whispered directions without complaint despite the obvious discomfort and claustrophobia of their route. Behind them, muffled voices indicated the assault team had discovered the corner suite empty. Radio chatter exploded with frustrated commands as their carefully planned operation encountered an unexpected complication. The timeline was falling apart, and professional soldiers didn't like surprises that put their mission at risk. Sarah and Dr. Chun reached a vertical shaft that dropped to the basement level. Sarah went first, using her hands and feet to control her descent down maintenance ladders installed for equipment service. Dr. Chun followed with surprising agility for an academic, her determination overcoming any fear of heights or enclosed spaces. The basement level offered access to the building's foundation and the drainage system that connected to the tunnel network Sarah had used earlier. But it also put them directly beneath the assault team, who would soon realize their targets had escaped the second floor. Professional trackers would quickly identify the maintenance access and follow the same route. Dr. Chun, Sarah whispered as they moved through the basement toward the tunnel entrance. What kind of research are you working on? What makes you valuable enough for them to risk an operation like this? Advanced cryptographic systems, Dr. Chun replied quietly. Quantum-resistant encryption methods that could revolutionize military communications. If hostile nations acquired my research, it could compromise every secure communication system currently in use. Sarah understood immediately. Dr. Chen's work wasn't just valuable. It was potentially world-changing. In the wrong hands, her research could cripple military and intelligence operations globally. No wonder someone was willing to assault a military base to acquire her. They reached the drainage tunnel entrance as footsteps echoed from above. The assault team had found their escape route and was following rapidly. Sarah helped Dr. Chun into the tunnel, then paused to consider their tactical situation. Running would only delay the inevitable. Professional pursuers with superior numbers and equipment would eventually run them down. But Sarah had advantages they didn't understand: intimate knowledge of the base layout, specialized combat training, and, most importantly, the element of surprise. They expected to be chasing a scientist and possibly a security guard. They had no idea they were hunting someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of making enemies disappear. Time to remind them that hunters could become the hunted. Sarah guided Dr. Chun through the drainage tunnel system with practiced efficiency, but her mind was already formulating a counterattack strategy. Running would only postpone the inevitable confrontation, and professional pursuers would eventually corner them through superior numbers and coordination. Better to choose the time and place for engagement rather than react to enemy initiative. The tunnel network connected multiple buildings across the base, offering numerous routes and hiding places that enemy intelligence wouldn't have identified. Sarah's 6 months of routine maintenance work had given her knowledge that no briefing could provide, which passages were wide enough for rapid movement, which sections flooded during heavy rain, and, most importantly, which locations offered tactical advantages for someone fighting against superior numbers. Dr. Chun, I need you to understand something, Sarah whispered as they paused at a junction where 3 tunnels intersected. These people won't give up easily. Your research is too valuable, and they've invested too much in this operation to quit because of complications. We can't outrun them indefinitely. Dr. Chin's breathing was controlled but rapid, adrenaline and fear combining with the physical exertion of crawling through cramped spaces. What are you saying? I'm saying I need to stop them here now before they can reorganize and bring in reinforcements. Sarah checked her rifle and remaining ammunition. There's a maintenance chamber about 50 meters ahead that connects to the base's central utility systems. I want you to continue to that location and wait for me there. You're talking about fighting them alone. That's suicide. Sarah smiled grimly in the darkness. Dr. Chun, I spent 8 years in naval special warfare. These tunnels are about to become a very bad place to be if you're hunting someone who knows how to use confined spaces for tactical advantage. Before Dr. Chun could respond, Sarah was moving back toward the pursuit. The drainage system offered perfect conditions for what military professionals called close quarters battle. Confined spaces where superior numbers became a disadvantage and individual skill determined outcomes. Her SEAL training had included extensive practice in similar environments, from shipboarding operations to urban combat in buildings and sewers. The assault team was moving through the tunnels with tactical discipline, but they were operating in unfamiliar territory against an opponent whose capabilities they'd seriously underestimated. Their radio communications indicated frustration at the unexpected complication to what should have been a simple extraction mission. Sarah positioned herself at a tunnel junction where 3 passages converged, creating a natural ambush site. The acoustic properties of the concrete tunnels would make it difficult for enemies to determine the direction of gunfire, while multiple exit routes provided escape options if the tactical situation deteriorated. She'd fought in similar conditions in urban environments overseas, where insurgents tried to use tunnel networks to avoid conventional military superiority. The first enemy fighter appeared at the tunnel entrance, moving cautiously with his rifle ready. Professional technique, proper spacing from his teammates, finger on the trigger, and safety disengaged. But his movements suggested someone more familiar with open terrain than confined spaces, and his equipment was optimized for conventional combat rather than tunnel fighting. Sarah let him advance into the killing zone before engaging. Her first shot was precisely placed, center mass through the gap in his body armor where plates didn't overlap. The sound was devastating in the enclosed space, echoing and reverberating until it became impossible to determine its origin. The fighter dropped without a sound, his rifle clattering against concrete. The second man reacted quickly, dropping to a prone position and returning fire toward where he thought the shot had originated. His bullets sparked off tunnel walls and drainage grates, but Sarah was already moving through a connecting passage to position herself behind his location. Military doctrine emphasized gaining and maintaining the initiative in close quarters combat, forcing enemies to react rather than plan. She emerged from an unexpected angle and engaged the second fighter before he could adjust his position. 2 quick shots, both precisely placed before disappearing back into the tunnel network. The confined space amplified every sound, creating confusion about enemy positions and making coordinated response nearly impossible. Radio chatter exploded with frustrated commands as the assault team leader tried to coordinate his remaining men in an environment that negated most conventional military advantages. Sarah monitored their communications while moving to her next position, understanding their tactical challenges better than they did. The remaining 4 fighters were bunching together for mutual support. Exactly the wrong response in confined spaces where one well-placed grenade could eliminate multiple targets. Sarah had acquired fragmentation grenades from the first enemy fighters she'd killed, and the tunnel acoustics would amplify the blast effects considerably. But grenades would also threaten Dr. Chen's position, and Sarah needed to ensure the scientist's safety above all other considerations. Instead, she relied on precision marksmanship and superior positioning to continue degrading enemy capabilities. The third fighter appeared at another tunnel entrance, moving with extreme caution after witnessing his teammate's fate. Sarah engaged him from an elevated position where a maintenance ladder provided access to upper drainage systems. The angle allowed her to bypass his body armor completely, ending the threat before he could warn his remaining teammates about the new firing position. The assault team leader was adapting quickly, demonstrating the tactical flexibility expected from professional soldiers. His radio communications indicated he was pulling his remaining men back from the tunnel system and calling for reinforcements to seal off all possible exits. Smart tactics that would eventually succeed if Sarah remained passive. Time to take the initiative completely. Sarah moved through the drainage network toward the location where she'd left Dr. Chun, but her route took her past the building's main electrical systems. Her SEAL training had included basic demolitions and sabotage techniques designed to disrupt enemy operations without requiring heavy explosives. The base's electrical grid offered interesting possibilities for someone with technical knowledge and creative thinking. She located the main power distribution panel that controlled lighting and security systems for multiple buildings. A few precise cuts with her knife disabled backup power systems while leaving main power intact, creating conditions where lights would fail suddenly, without obvious explanation. In darkness, her night vision training would provide decisive advantages over enemies equipped with standard tactical lights. The utility chamber where Dr. Chen waited was accessible through a vertical shaft that connected to the central drainage system. Sarah climbed quickly, using maintenance rungs installed for service access. She found the scientist sitting quietly in darkness, her laptop bag clutched protectively against her chest. "Dr. Chun, we're leaving now," Sarah announced. "But first I need to know exactly what kind of encryption research you're carrying. If these people get that information, how much damage could they do?" "Catastrophic," Dr. Chen replied immediately. "My work could compromise every secure communication system currently protecting military operations worldwide. Intelligence networks, diplomatic communications, financial systems. Everything would be vulnerable." Sarah understood the stakes completely. Dr. Chen's research couldn't be allowed to fall into hostile hands under any circumstances. That knowledge changed the tactical equation fundamentally. This wasn't just about rescuing one person. It was about protecting national security information that could affect millions of lives. "Is your research backed up somewhere safe?" Sarah asked. "The main databases are secure at Pentagon facilities. But my current work includes breakthrough discoveries that exist only on this laptop. If they get it, they won't," Sarah said with quiet certainty. "But I need you to do something for me. I want you to continue through this passage to an exit that connects to the base perimeter. There's a drainage outlet about 200 meters north of here that opens outside the fence line. Once you're clear, find a phone and call this number." Sarah gave Dr. Chun a memorized contact number that would reach certain people who specialized in situations like this. People who would understand immediately what was happening and respond with appropriate resources. "What about you?" Dr. Chen asked. "I'm going to finish what they started," Sarah replied. "These people came here to take something that doesn't belong to them. Time to explain why that was a mistake." Dr. Chen studied Sarah's face in the dim light, filtering through ventilation grates. You're not just former military, are you? You're something more specialized. Dr. Chun, some questions are better left unasked. Right now, focus on getting that research to safety. Everything else is my responsibility. The scientist nodded and disappeared into the tunnel passage, carrying secrets that could reshape global security if they fell into the wrong hands. Sarah watched her go, then began her own movement toward a confrontation that would end this situation permanently. The hunters were about to discover they'd chosen the wrong prey. Ghost was fully awake now, and she had work to finish. Sarah emerged from the tunnel system near the base motor pool, where enemy extraction vehicles waited with engines running. The assault team leader had repositioned his remaining forces to control all possible escape routes, assuming his targets would eventually be forced into the open where superior firepower could overwhelm them. Professional tactics that would work against conventional opposition. But Sarah wasn't planning to escape. She was planning to eliminate the threat permanently. The electrical sabotage she'd implemented earlier began taking effect as building lights flickered and failed across the base. Emergency generators kicked in for critical systems, but large sections of the compound plunged into darkness that would favor someone with night vision training over enemies dependent on tactical lights and unfamiliar with local terrain. Through her tactical radio, Sarah monitored enemy communications as their carefully orchestrated operation continued deteriorating. The assault team leader was receiving pressure from his command element to extract immediately with or without the primary objective. Too much time had elapsed. Base defenders were organizing effective resistance, and reinforcements would arrive soon. The professional timeline for this type of mission was measured in minutes, not hours. Sarah counted 3 fighters maintaining perimeter security around the extraction vehicles, while others had deployed to watch tunnel exits and building entrances where targets might appear. Their positions were tactically sound for conventional threats, but they made a critical error in assumption. They expected their enemies to flee rather than attack. She moved through the motor pool using vehicle positions for concealment, closing distance while remaining invisible to enemy observation. Her approach route kept her below their sight lines while providing multiple firing positions and escape routes. Standard SEAL infiltration techniques that she'd practiced thousands of times in training and applied successfully in real-world operations. The first target was the fighter positioned near the lead extraction vehicle. Sarah engaged him from point-blank range, using a knife rather than firearms to avoid alerting other team members. Silent elimination that removed one threat while maintaining tactical surprise for continued operations. The second fighter was monitoring radio communications while maintaining security on the vehicle perimeter. Sarah approached from his blind spot, using the same techniques that had earned her the call sign Ghost during active duty. He never knew she was there. The third perimeter guard presented a more complex challenge, positioned where he could observe multiple approach routes while maintaining communication with the assault team leader. Sarah needed to eliminate him without triggering a general alarm that would bring the entire enemy force down on her position. She used the motor pool's maintenance equipment to create a distraction, triggering hydraulic systems that generated noise and movement in a different direction. When the guard turned to investigate, Sarah closed the distance and neutralized him with precision that left no opportunity for warning his teammates. 3 enemy fighters eliminated in less than 2 minutes, with their command element unaware that their extraction site was compromised. The assault team leader continued coordinating search patterns for targets he assumed were hiding somewhere in the tunnel network or nearby buildings. Sarah disabled the extraction vehicles methodically using techniques learned during SEAL training for sabotaging enemy equipment. Punctured tires, severed brake lines, destroyed ignition systems. Enough damage to ensure these vehicles would never leave the base, while appearing to be battle damage rather than deliberate sabotage. With the extraction route eliminated, the remaining enemy fighters were trapped on the base with no means of escape. Their mission had failed completely, but professional soldiers would continue fighting until eliminated or captured. Sarah needed to finish this before base security forces arrived and potentially got caught in crossfire. The tactical radio revealed that the assault team leader had consolidated his remaining men at the VIP quarters building, apparently believing Dr. Chun was still hiding somewhere inside. For fighters, well-armed and positioned in a defensible location, expecting an attack from outside the building rather than from within. Sarah smiled grimly. She knew that building better than anyone on the base. She entered through the same utility access she'd used earlier, moving through maintenance passages that enemy intelligence had never identified. The assault team had secured the main entrances and windows, but they couldn't guard against threats they didn't know existed. Sarah positioned herself in the building's electrical system, accessing the main circuit breakers that controlled lighting and power distribution. She'd learned these systems during months of routine maintenance, knowledge that now provided tactical advantages no military briefing could duplicate. She waited until the enemy fighters were positioned exactly where she wanted them, then plunged the building into complete darkness. The assault team's night vision equipment was excellent, but it couldn't match years of training and operating without any visual references. Sarah moved through the building in total darkness, using memory and spatial awareness to navigate while enemy fighters struggled to maintain formation and communication. Her first engagement came when one fighter separated from his team to investigate noise from the electrical room. Sarah eliminated him silently before he could report his findings. The second fighter went down when he approached the stairway, where Sarah waited in perfect concealment. The assault team leader realized his tactical situation was collapsing and attempted to rally his remaining men for a fighting withdrawal. Professional leadership under impossible circumstances, but it was too late. Sarah had reduced his effective force below the minimum needed for coordinated military action. The final engagement occurred in the building's main hallway, where the last two fighters had taken defensive positions behind improvised barricades. They were expecting an assault from the direction of conventional entrances, not from directly above their position where building maintenance had provided Sarah with unexpected access routes. She dropped through a ceiling access panel directly behind their defensive line, engaging both targets before either could react effectively. The assault team leader had time to key his radio once before Sarah's precise marksmanship ended the engagement permanently. Silence returned to the VIP quarters building as Sarah checked each enemy position to confirm threats were neutralized. The assault team that had arrived with such confident professionalism was finished. Their extraction vehicles were disabled, their communications were severed, and their mission objectives were completely compromised. In the distance, Sarah could hear base security forces finally organizing effective resistance as Colonel Matthews coordinated defensive positions. The distraction attack on the main base was collapsing as enemy fighters realized their extraction support had vanished. Without leadership or escape routes, they would soon surrender or be eliminated by superior numbers of defending soldiers. Sarah moved through the building one final time, collecting enemy equipment and intelligence materials that might provide information about who had sponsored this operation. The assault team's weapons and gear were military-grade, but unmarked, suggesting professional mercenaries rather than state military forces. Someone with serious financial resources and political connections had organized this attack. She found what she was looking for in the assault team leader's equipment: encrypted communication devices and mission briefings that would provide intelligence analysts with leads to pursue. The operation had failed completely, but the people responsible for planning it remained hidden behind layers of deception and proxy organizations. Sarah's tactical radio crackled with transmissions as base security forces began reporting sector clear as they regained control of the compound. Colonel Matthews was coordinating damage assessments and casualty reports, his voice calm and professional despite the chaos his command had endured. Time for Ghost to disappear again. Sarah made her way to the motor pool, where she quickly changed back into her food service uniform and discarded the military equipment she'd acquired during the engagement. The transformation was as complete as before, from elite warrior back to invisible kitchen worker who drew no attention or uncomfortable questions. She was washing dishes in the dining hall kitchen when Lieutenant Davis found her 20 minutes later, leading a security patrol that was checking all base facilities. The young officer stared at her with undisguised amazement, clearly struggling to reconcile what he'd witnessed earlier with a woman now performing routine kitchen duties. "Sarah? How did you get back here?" "Through the service tunnels, sir," she replied, not looking up from her work. "Figured I'd better get back to my station once the shooting stopped. Kitchen's a mess from all the fighting, but the equipment seems to be working fine." Davis noticed the dining hall showed signs of the earlier firefight. Bullet holes in walls, overturned furniture, broken windows. But the kitchen was spotless, and Sarah appeared completely unaffected by the violence that had occurred throughout the base. "Sarah, about what happened earlier, Lieutenant," she interrupted quietly. "Sometimes it's better not to ask questions about things that might not have simple answers. Today was complicated for everyone. Probably best to focus on helping people get back to normal routines." Davis studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. But if you ever decide you want to talk about anything, I'm a good listener." "I appreciate that, sir. But right now, I think everyone could use a hot meal and some familiar routine. Why don't you tell Colonel Matthews that I'll have fresh coffee and sandwiches ready in 30 minutes for anyone who wants them?" As Davis left to deliver her message, Sarah continued her kitchen work with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown for the past 6 months. To anyone observing, she was simply the reliable food service worker getting back to her normal duties after an unusual day. But outside, Dr. Chun was safely making contact with the people Sarah had directed her to call. The enemy assault force had been completely eliminated. Base security was restored, and the woman who served meals by day had successfully protected secrets that could affect global security. Ghost had completed another mission, then vanished back into the invisibility that made her most dangerous. Tomorrow, she would serve breakfast with a polite smile, and no one would ever guess what she was truly capable of when normal people needed protecting from those who threatened their safety. Some skills, once learned, were never forgotten. They simply waited quietly until circumstances demanded their use again.